The battlefield was silent after the clash of machines and fire. Smoke rose into the sky. Broken ships lay scattered across the ground, and the red sun cast a strange glow on the ruins. Among the wreckage stood a human soldier named Daniel, his armor dented, his rifle damaged, but his spirit unbroken. He breathed slowly, scanning the battlefield, knowing that the war was not over yet. From the shadows, she appeared, an alien warrior taller than any human Daniel had ever seen. Her skin shimmered like silver steel, her eyes glowed with fierce blue light, and her body was covered in heavy armor made of unknown alloys. Her footsteps echoed like thunder as she walked towards him, each step leaving cracks in the broken ground. She stopped in front of him, towering over him by several feet, her shadow covering his entire form. The alien warrior looked down at Daniel and laughed. Her voice was deep, echoing like a drum. So this is what humanity sends against us? A small creature with fragile bones and soft flesh. She leaned closer, her sharp teeth flashing in a mocking smile. You are too small to satisfy even a fight. I could crush you with one hand. Daniel did not answer. His eyes stayed fixed on her, calm and steady, as if her words meant nothing. This silence seemed to anger her more, because she expected fear, begging, or even surrender. But Daniel gave her none. The alien warrior circled him, her heavy armor scraping against the stone. She raised her massive hand and compared it with his, laughing loudly. Look at you, human. Your size is pathetic. Your species should hide, not fight. What strength can you possibly show me? Daniel finally spoke, his voice steady. Strength is not always measured in size. His words were simple, but they carried weight. The alien warrior blinked, surprised for a moment, then laughed again, louder this time. Her laugh echoed through the ruins, shaking the broken walls. She slammed her fist into a piece of wreckage, crushing it into dust, and pointed at Daniel. This is strength. What can your small hands do? What can your small body survive? She spread her arms wide, her confidence unshaken. You are fragile. You are weak. You are nothing but prey. Daniel adjusted his broken rifle, though it no longer worked, and stood firm. His calm expression never left his face, his breathing steady even as the giant alien mocked him. He remembered his training, the long nights of endurance, the pain of survival drills, the countless moments where giving up would have been easy, but he chose to continue. That was the true strength of humanity, and he carried it in his bones. The alien warrior, noticing his stillness, grew more irritated. You don't speak much, little human. Do you not fear me? Or have you accepted your fate? She leaned down, her face inches away from his, her eyes glowing like fire, searching for fear in his. But Daniel's gaze never broke, calm and sharp as steel. The silence stretched, heavy with tension. Even the ruined battlefield seemed to wait, the broken machines no longer groaning, the smoke no longer moving. It was as if the universe itself paused for this moment. The small human soldier facing the towering alien warrior. She mocked, he endured, and the stage for their clash was set. Then, with a sudden move, the alien warrior grabbed a steel beam lying near her feet. She bent it as if it were paper, twisted it into a knot, and threw it at Daniel's feet. This is the difference between us, she declared, her voice booming. I am power, I am strength, I'm the storm that breaks worlds. And you are nothing more than dust. Daniel looked down at the twisted metal, then back at her. He spoke quietly, almost a whisper, but the words carried like thunder in her ears. Size does not decide survival. Endurance does. Her smile faltered just for a second before returning, but this time it was thinner, sharper, less certain. She raised her weapon, a massive blade that glowed with alien energy, its edge humming with deadly power. Pointing it at Daniel, she hissed, "Then show me, little human. Show me this strength you claim to have. Show me what your species can do before I break you." Daniel straightened his back, tightened his fists, and took a deep breath. The mocking words no longer mattered. The size no longer mattered. What mattered was the coming test, the clash of two worlds, two definitions of strength. And in that moment, Daniel knew one thing. She would not leave this fight the same. The alien warrior's laughter echoed across the ruins, sharp and cruel. Her towering figure stood like a wall of steel, her glowing blade humming in the fading light of the battlefield. She raised the weapon high, letting the air crackle with energy, and said, "I will not waste time. Show me your strength, little human, if you dare." Daniel stood still, his battered armor cracked, his broken rifle hanging useless at his side. He could feel the heavy air pressing down on him, the weight of the alien's presence trying to crush his spirit. But his eyes remained calm, and his heart beat steady. Every soldier's training had taught him one thing. Fear was the enemy, not the giant standing in front of him. The alien warrior circled him slowly, her boots breaking stone with every step. She flexed her clawed fingers, making the air hum with raw force, and sneered, "Your kind hides behind machines and weapons, but stripped of them, you are nothing. Prove me wrong, human, if you can." Daniel dropped the broken rifle to the ground with a clang. The sound was small compared to the thunder of her voice, but it echoed with meaning. He would not rely on the gun. Not this time. His fists tightened, his stance lowered, and his eyes sharpened like a blade. The alien warrior tilted her head, almost amused. "You mean to face me with only your body? This will be entertaining." She raised her blade, and with a sudden, violent motion, brought it crashing down. The ground split open, stone and metal shattering, but Daniel had already moved, rolling aside with swift precision. Dust and fire exploded around him, yet his breathing never broke. "Fast," the alien warrior muttered, her mocking grin widening. "But speed without power is useless." She swung again, the massive weapon slicing the air, the energy burning through the wreckage. Daniel ducked under the strike, his smaller frame slipping through gaps her giant body could not. He struck the side of her armor with a sharp punch, but the blow bounced off, barely leaving a dent. She laughed at the attempt. "Is this your strength? Ant bites on steel." Her hand shot out, grabbing him by the chest and lifting him into the air. Her claws dug into his armor, pressing against his ribs. Daniel's body screamed with pain, but his eyes stayed locked on hers, unblinking. With a roar, she hurled him across the battlefield, his body crashing against a pile of broken metal. Dust rose around him, the ruins groaned, but slowly, Daniel stood back up. His knees shook, his armor cracked further, blood ran down his face. And yet, he did not fall. The alien warrior paused, her grin fading just a little. "Still standing? Curious. Most of your kind break by now," she said, her tone less mocking and more cautious. Daniel wiped the blood from his lips and answered, his voice calm and steady. "Strength is not how hard you hit. It's how many times you rise after falling." Her eyes narrowed, the mocking glow dimming. She had faced countless warriors across galaxies, most stronger and larger than her. But none had spoken with such steady conviction while broken and bleeding. Something deep within her shifted, though she refused to admit it. With a snarl, she charged, each step shaking the ground like thunder. Her blade slashed through the air again, aiming to end this fight quickly. Daniel ducked, rolled, and used the ruins as cover, his smaller size working as an advantage. He moved through the wreckage like water, always one step ahead. Every strike she made cracked stone and tore metal, but missed him. Frustration boiled in her chest. "This is not strength. This is cowardice," she shouted, her voice shaking the ruins. Daniel's voice echoed from behind the debris, calm but sharp. "No, this is survival." Her eyes snapped to the sound, but he was already gone, moving again. He struck from the side, throwing a broken piece of steel into her legs, forcing her balance to shift. She stumbled, her massive body slamming against a wall, sending rubble crashing down. The ground trembled as she caught herself, her eyes blazing with fury. For the first time, the alien warrior realized something dangerous. His size was not weakness, it was weapon. He could move where she could not, slip through spaces she could never reach, and strike when she least expected it. It was not brute force, but it was strength nonetheless. Daniel stepped out from the smoke, breathing heavily but still standing tall. He stared at her with unshaken resolve and said, "You mock my size, but it is not size that wins wars. It is will." The alien warrior tightened her grip on her blade, her mocking laughter gone now, replaced by a low growl. For the first time, she saw him not as prey, but as a challenge. The air between them burned with tension, the ruins holding their breath. The true fight was only beginning, and neither would leave unchanged. The battlefield groaned under the weight of their clash. Smoke curled around broken towers. Sparks flew from shattered machines, and the red sky seemed to watch as predator and prey circled each other. Only now, the alien warrior was no longer sure who was predator and who was prey. Her glowing blade hummed with restless energy as she dragged it across the ground, cutting deep scars into the stone. Her eyes locked onto Daniel, her breath heavy with frustration. She had mocked his size, but now she was forced to admit, this small human refused to fall. Every time she threw him down, he rose again, scarred but unbroken. Daniel's chest burned with pain, his arms shook from exhaustion, and his vision blurred with blood. But he had learned long ago that pain was not an enemy. It was a teacher. Each time the alien warrior struck, he studied her patterns, her movements, the weight of her attacks. She was powerful, yes, but she was predictable. Her size gave her strength, but it also chained her. "You fight like fire," Daniel called out, his voice echoing through the smoke. Hot, fast, and burning everything in its path. He stepped carefully over broken steel, eyes sharp despite the pain. But fire consumes itself when it cannot find fuel. The alien warrior snarled, gripping her blade tighter. "And you, little human, are nothing but fuel." She lunged, swinging her weapon in a brutal arc meant to end him. The ground exploded as the blade struck, sending shockwaves through the rubble. But Daniel was already gone, slipping to her side, moving faster than her giant body could follow. He struck with precision, a sharp blow to the joint of her armor. The hit was small, but made her stagger, her footing faltering for the first time. Her eyes widened as she realized the truth. He was not aiming for power, he was aiming for weakness. "You mock me," she growled, turning quickly and slashing again. Daniel ducked, the blade searing the air above his head. "No," he replied, his tone steady. "I'm teaching you." Rage burned in her chest, louder than the hum of her weapon. She charged, faster, fiercer, each strike carrying the force of thunder. Daniel dodged, rolled, and slid through the ruins, every movement guided not by strength, but by experience. He was not the biggest, not the strongest, but he was the one who had learned how to survive. Each strike she made cost her energy, each miss drained her power. Her massive body demanded more fuel, more force, more strength. But Daniel endured, his smaller frame conserving energy, his strategy weaving around her fury like a shadow. At last, she swung wide, her blade embedding itself into a collapsed wall. For a moment, it stuck, the weapon's edge humming as it struggled to pull free. Daniel seized the chance, sprinting forward and striking her exposed side with a jagged piece of steel. The blow didn't pierce her armor, but it made her stumble hard, crashing into the wreckage with a roar. The ground shook as she fell to one knee, her armored hand gripping the earth. Her glowing eyes flickered with shock as she looked up at him. "How?" she muttered, her voice low, more uncertain than mocking. "How does something so small endure this long?" Daniel stood tall despite the blood running down his face, his breath heavy but steady. "Because strength isn't in size," he said, his voice carrying across the broken field. "It's in how much you can endure, how much you can adapt, how much you can fight when everything tells you to fall." Her chest heaved, Her mind raced. She had fought beasts the size of mountains, machines armed with weapons of mass destruction, and armies trained to kill. Yet here, in the ruins of a war zone, a single human soldier was breaking everything she believed about strength. The alien warrior roared and yanked her blade free, the energy sparking violently. Her pride refused to surrender, even as her body screamed from exhaustion. She leapt forward once more, her massive weapon raised high, ready to crush him in a final, desperate blow. Daniel didn't run. He didn't hide. Instead, he raised his fists, his body trembling but unshaken, his spirit burning brighter than ever. And as the blade descended, the battlefield itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if the small human's hidden strength could stand against the fury of a giant. The alien warrior's blade came down like a storm, splitting the ground with raw force. Stone shattered, metal screamed, and fire burst upward as Daniel threw himself aside at the very last moment. The shockwave hurled him against a wall, his armor cracking further, blood running across his jaw. But still, he rose, his legs trembling, but his eyes steady. The alien warrior snarled, ripping her blade free from the ground, sparks dancing along its glowing edge. "You should be broken," she hissed, her voice thick with frustration. No creature this small should rise after that. Her pride demanded his defeat, but her mind whispered a dangerous truth. He would not break easily. Daniel staggered forward, his breath ragged, his fists clenched. Every nerve in his body screamed for rest, but his spirit refused. He had survived battles where odds were impossible. He had endured nights colder than death. And he knew one thing. If he fell now, it would not be from weakness, but from surrender. And surrender was something he had never learned. The alien warrior rushed him again, her strikes faster, heavier, fueled by rage. Her weapon tore through the ruins, collapsing walls and crushing stone as she swung wildly. Daniel ducked and weaved, each movement costing him more strength, but each dodge bringing him closer to understanding the truth of her power, closer to finding her weakness. A massive strike slammed near his feet, the ground bursting apart, and Daniel stumbled. She grinned viciously, seizing the chance, and slammed her armored fist into his chest. The blow threw him across the battlefield, his body rolling against steel and fire. He coughed, blood filling his mouth, his vision swimming. For a moment, silence pressed against him. His body begged him to stay down, to give in, to end this hopeless fight. But then he remembered the faces of his comrades, the voices of those who once called humanity fragile, weak, small. He remembered every insult, every doubt, every time his kind was mocked for being less. And he rose again, swaying but unbroken. The alien warrior's mocking smile faltered as she saw him rise. It wasn't his strength that unsettled her. It was his refusal to die. "Oh, you are madness," she whispered, her voice shaking. "No body this fragile can endure so much." Daniel wiped the blood from his lips, his eyes locking with hers. "This isn't madness," he said quietly. "This is humanity." She snarled, roaring like thunder, and charged again, her massive body shaking the ruins. But Daniel no longer moved to escape. Instead, he shifted, using the battlefield itself as his weapon. He ducked behind broken beams, lured her into narrow passages, forced her blade to strike walls instead of flesh. Each miss weakened her, drained her, made her doubt. Her size became her prison, her power her chain. Every time she swung, she wasted more energy while Daniel endured. Every trap he set, rolling steel under her feet, forcing rubble to collapse around her, was a reminder brains could defeat brawn. She roared in fury, but the more she raged, the clearer it became. She was fighting not a weakling, but a survivor. At last, she swung her blade downward with all her strength. Daniel sidestepped, and the weapon crashed deep into the wreckage, stuck fast between slabs of stone. For a heartbeat, she struggled to pull it free her massive arms straining. And Daniel moved, grabbing a jagged steel rod and striking the joints of her armor with precise, relentless blows. She staggered, her body trembling under the assault. It wasn't the force of the strikes, it was the precision. Every hit landed on a weak point. Every strike built pressure. Every moment chipped away at her confidence. The alien warrior dropped to one knee, panting, her blade still trapped, her armor dented. Her glowing eyes locked onto Daniel, no longer with mockery, but with disbelief. "You are not supposed to stand against me," she whispered, almost to herself. Daniel stood tall, his body battered, his blood staining the dust. He raised the steel rod like a soldier raises a banner, and said, "You thought size was strength, but you were wrong. The true strength is never giving up." The battlefield fell silent, smoke curling around them like shadows. For the first time, the alien warrior's pride wavered, her heart unsure. And in that silence, she realized the truth. This fight was no longer about crushing a small enemy. It was about surviving the spirit of something she had never understood. The alien warrior knelt among the ruins, her breath heavy, her armor cracked, her blade stuck in the broken ground. For the first time in countless battles, she felt something she had never known doubt. Her strength had crushed beasts larger than cities. Her blade had torn through fleets, yet this small human refused to fall. Daniel stood opposite her, his body bruised and bleeding, his armor nearly shattered. But his back was straight, his eyes calm, and his spirit unbroken. Every breath he drew was sharp with pain, but every step forward carried a weight that shook her more than any weapon. "You still rise," she whispered, her voice softer than before. "Even after all of this." Her glowing eyes narrowed, not in mockery, but in wonder. "What drives you, human? What force makes you stand when your body begs you to fall?" Daniel's voice was quiet, but each word carried like steel across the battlefield. "We stand because we must. We fight not because we're the strongest, but because we cannot afford to surrender." He tightened his fists, his blood dripping onto the dust. "Our spirit is what carries us when our bodies fail." The alien warrior gritted her teeth, forcing herself back to her feet. Her pride screamed that she could not yield, that no human should rise above her kind. With a roar, she tore her blade free from the rubble, the energy humming violently in her hands. "If it is spirit you claim," she growled, "then let me break it." She swung again, her strikes a storm of fire and steel. Each blow was heavier than the last, her body desperate to prove her strength was absolute. But Daniel endured, slipping through her fury, striking with precision when he could, retreating when he must. Every clash left him weaker, but every survival left her shaken. At last, she cornered him near the broken shell of a fallen ship. Her blade came down with thunder, striking the ground so hard the wreckage collapsed around them. Daniel was buried in smoke and dust, and for a heartbeat, the warrior believed she had won. But then, through the haze, a figure rose, limping, broken, yet still standing. Daniel pushed aside the steel and fire, his eyes locked on hers. The sight froze her blood. This was no longer a fragile creature. This was something else entirely. Something relentless, something unstoppable, something born from the will to never surrender. "You fight like a storm," she said slowly, her voice trembling with something she refused to name. "But storms end. They burn out." Daniel shook his head, his voice steady. "Storms may end, but the human spirit endures." He moved forward, every step a struggle, but each one heavier than the last. The alien warrior swung, but slower now, her arms tired, her pride cracked. Daniel dodged, used the debris around him, and struck her with clever precision. A shard of steel slammed against her weapon's hilt, knocking it aside. Another strike hit her knee joint, forcing her to stumble again. It wasn't power that pushed him forward. It was will. It wasn't size that gave him strength. It was spirit. And with every move, the alien warrior saw it more clearly. This was the weapon of humanity. Her knees buckled. Her blade fell to the ground, its glow fading. She collapsed to one knee once more, her massive hands pressing into the dirt. Her chest heaved, her pride in ruins, her eyes wide with disbelief. Daniel stood above her, his body broken, but his spirit blazing. He raised the shard of steel in his hand, not as a weapon, but as a symbol. "You asked what makes us rise," he said, his voice echoing like a command. "This is the answer. The human spirit does not yield. It does not break. It does not die." The alien warrior stared at him, speechless, her breath caught in her chest. She had mocked him, ridiculed him, laughed at his small size. But now, she realized that strength was not measured by the body. It was measured by the fire that refused to go out. The battlefield was silent except for the crackle of burning wreckage. Two figures stood, one giant, kneeling in exhaustion, the other small, bleeding but unbroken. And in that silence, the truth echoed louder than any war cry. The true weapon of humanity was not power, not machines, not even survival. It was spirit. The alien warrior's chest rose and fell, each breath heavier than the last. Her massive frame trembled as she leaned on her blade, her armor dented and cracked from the relentless fight. Her mocking smile was gone, replaced by silence, the silence of disbelief, of realization. Daniel stood before her, blood dripping from his wounds, his armor nearly falling apart. Every muscle in his body screamed with pain, yet his eyes still burned with that same calm fire. He had no weapon, no strength to match hers, and yet he had endured. An endurance had turned the impossible into truth. The alien warrior lowered her gaze to him, her voice shaking as she spoke. "I mock you for your size. I called you weak. But here you stand, when even my kind would have fallen." Her words carried no arrogance now, only raw honesty. "You should have broken long ago, yet you rise again. Why?" Daniel wiped the blood from his mouth, his voice steady despite the pain. "Because giving up is a choice, and I don't choose it." He stepped closer, his shadow small compared to hers, but his presence greater than it had ever been. "You thought strength was power. You thought it was size. But true strength is the will to keep going when everything says stop." Her glowing eyes flickered, uncertainty burning inside them. She had fought countless warriors, but none had ever spoken words that cut deeper than blades. She realized now that this fight was not just about survival. It was about truth, and the truth was terrifying. She slammed her fist into the ground, dust flying upward, her roar shaking the ruins. But when she lifted her gaze again, her roar had no mockery in it. It was not rage. It was something closer to surrender, closer to respect. "You are not prey," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You are not weak. You're something else." Daniel did not smile, did not celebrate. He simply stood there, steady as stone, his eyes never leaving hers. "You see it now," he said, his tone calm, but unyielding. "Humanity is small, yes. Fragile, yes. But we endure. That is our strength. That is why we survive." Her massive shoulders sank, her pride cracking like her armor. All her laughter, her taunts, her certainty in superiority, they had shattered in the face of something she could not destroy. And as she looked at him, still standing despite his wounds, she felt something she had never expected to feel toward a human: respect. Slowly, the alien warrior dropped her blade to the ground, the weapon's glow fading as it struck the dirt. She knelt on one knee, her towering form lowered before him, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement. "You have shown me what I could not see," she said softly. "Strength is not in size, not in power. It is in spirit." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Daniel stood silent, his breathing ragged, but inside, he knew this was more than victory. This was understanding, a bridge built between two enemies through blood, endurance, and will. For the first time, the alien warrior bowed her head to someone smaller than her. Not as a prisoner, not as prey, but as an equal. Her pride had been broken, but in its place rose something stronger, respect. She whispered, almost to herself, I mocked you, human. But now, you leave me speechless. The ruins were quiet, the smoke drifting slowly into the crimson sky. And in that silence, two warriors, one giant, one small, stood bound not by victory or defeat, but by something greater, recognition of true strength. The battlefield had fallen quiet. The fires that once raged now flickered low, casting long shadows across the broken ruins. Ash drifted through the crimson sky like falling snow, and the silence was heavy, as if the world itself held its breath after witnessing what had just occurred. The alien warrior remained kneeling, her massive frame still trembling from exhaustion, her blade lying lifeless in the dust beside her. Her glowing eyes no longer burned with arrogance or rage, but with something deeper, heavier, respect. For the first time in her life, she bowed to someone smaller than her, not as a victim, not as prey, but as an equal. Daniel stood before her, his body broken, his armor shattered, blood painting his face and hands. And yet he remained upright, steady as stone, the fire in his eyes still alive. Every breath was pain, but every heartbeat was victory. Not over her, but over doubt, over weakness, over the belief that humanity was less. The alien warrior's voice broke the silence, low and uncertain. I mock you for being small, fragile, weak, she said, her words carrying shame and awe. Her head lowered further, her voice almost a whisper. But you have shown me something greater than strength. You have shown me the spirit of your kind. Daniel said nothing for a long moment, his gaze steady. Finally, he stepped closer, his shadow falling across her kneeling form. We are not the strongest, he said softly. We are not the largest, nor the fastest. But we endure. That is what makes us dangerous. That is what makes us human. She lifted her gaze to him, her voice trembling. You can end me now. Strike me down. Claim victory, she said, almost challenging him. Her massive chest rose and fell with each labored breath, her pride daring him to prove himself through death. But Daniel shook his head, his words sharp but calm. Victory is not in killing. True victory is in surviving, and in being better than what tried to destroy you. For a moment, the alien warrior froze, her mind struggling to understand. Among her people, battles always ended in death. Respect was earned only through the crushing of enemies. But here stood a human, small and fragile, offering her life not out of weakness, but out of honor. And that broke something deeper inside her than any weapon could. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself to her feet, towering above him once more. But this time, her posture was different. No arrogance, no mockery, no superiority. Instead, she stood tall like a soldier before a commander, her massive form heavy with respect. You have changed me, she admitted, her voice echoing through the ruins. Her gaze softened, though the fire in her eyes still burned. I will never forget this fight, and I will never again call your kind weak. Daniel gave a faint nod, his face pale but resolute. Then it was worth it, he said simply. The two stood in silence, the ruins around them whispering with the wind. No words could capture what had been born here. Not a victory, not a defeat, but something greater. A bridge between species, a spark of respect in a universe of war. At last, the alien warrior turned, retrieving her fallen blade. But instead of raising it in challenge, she rested it across her shoulder like a banner. She looked back at him one final time, her lips curling into something rare for her. A smile, small but real. Human, she said, her voice carrying both pride and humility. You are more than I ever believed. Your size is small, but your strength, your spirit, is vast. And with that, she walked into the smoke, her massive figure fading into the broken horizon. Daniel stood alone among the ruins, his body broken, his spirit blazing brighter than the fires around him. The battle was over, but the lesson remained. Never underestimate humanity, for though their bodies may be fragile, their spirit will leave even giants speechless.